Welcome to Beyond Words Presents. Today we are here with filmmaker Will Arntz, who is best known for the film What the Bleep Do We Know? Many of you may have seen it, heard of it. It is its 10th anniversary and we are celebrating with a new version of Down the Rabbit Hole. And today Will is here to talk to us about what the difference is between What the Bleep and Down the Rabbit Hole, because it's not super clear. So Will, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Well, and the other thing that I want people to know is that they can join this conversation. If you have any questions for Will, use the Google Hangouts app, or you can use the hashtag BWPresents. And also, in the second half of the show, we have a special surprise. We have a winner of our Facebook contest for the Come and Talk with the Filmmaker contest. Her name is Eva, and she will be joining us halfway through, so look forward to that. So, Will, my very first question for you really is about the whole world of it. I mean, how did you come up with the idea for What the Bleep?
Oh boy,
I know.
how did I come up with it? Well, the idea, boy, if someone really wants to know the answer in gory detail, and this isn't a marketing pitch, but I might as well say it. We just today or yesterday re-released Down the Rabbit Hole, and we did two featurettes that are new. One's called A Brief History of What the Bleep, and that some people interviewed me about sort of where it came from. And it's a 25-minute piece, and I made some movies when I was young and in high school and college. There's some clips of that in there. It's kind of fun. But it really talks about where all the influences came from. I was originally a physics and math major in college. So that was kind of what I was into, and then I did a lot of spiritual studies. So the idea for What the Bleep was sort of a compilation of all these interests that were fairly eclectic I'd had over the years. And it started out as a fairly simple, it was going to be a simple really documentary about some of the confluence between spirit and science. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be, originally, it was going to be a $50,000 documentary with just some things cut together and some quotes, and then became a $100,000 documentary, and then a $500,000 documentary, and adding more things and deciding that we wanted something amazing, and it ended up costing millions. So we got carried away, which does happen. So where it came from was, I think, a lot of the short answer was my interest in spirituality and science, and the fact that there seem to be so many things. Let's not say that one proves the other, but they're highly suggestive that there is a connection going on, and that's what really we were exploring in the film. And so that was one of the big things, and then the other was my desire to make people laugh.
You did both incredibly well, because as every time I watch the film, I learned something new for myself. And I've watched the film 2 or 3 times now, and I know that there's people out there who have watched it hundreds of times because of that same reason. They've discovered new things every time they watch it. And I'm curious if you would go along with me on this assertion, but it seems like the thing that really brought the conversation of science and spirituality to the world at large. Would you say that's around accurate?
Well, is that accurate? Yeah, it is, because up until What the Bleep, I mean, the science and spirituality people, of course, there was the book The Tao of Physics, which was, Christoph Capra in I think the 80s sometime, and that was really one of the big first things, but that was a book that people into that sort of thing were doing. But as far as the public at large, I know one of the things that blew everyone's mind with What the Bleep is it was in movie theaters. I mean, we played in hundreds of movie theaters around the country and hundreds more around the world, and people were surprised that something with the quantum physics and spirituality was actually in the local movie theater. So that really got the discussion going for positive and negative. It did seem to irritate a lot of scientists. They thought we were encroaching upon their sacred grounds. So we got a lot of grief about that. We kind of thought we were going to get grief from the fundamentalist religions, but really we didn't at all. I mean, either we didn't hear from them or they were just like, oh, that's great. So that was a good surprise. But I think it really did bring the discussion sort of out of the metaphysical closet and up to the big screen where anyone could walk in and see it. So I know it was a major factor in doing that.
I remember when I first started working at Beyond Words, there were a couple of our things that I was familiar with. One being The Secret, of course, the other being What the Bleep. I remember seeing that cover, and I remember people talking about it constantly, and it really was just, it was a huge movement, and also just being based here in Portland, the film being made here really inspired a lot of a huge following here in Portland. So you've already answered one of my other questions, which was, did it grow organically? Because it sounds like it started so small, but then grew into something completely different.
Well, it grew organically with a lot of tending of the garden.
Mm.
So it did grow organically, but that's because we had plowed the fields, and did the seed. In fact, we used to have stuff we called seed screenings, where when we were going into a town. We did this in Portland, in fact. We contacted all the people in the unity churches. We contacted people who owned health food stores. We went to the yoga, all the yoga folks, and we would invite those people to a free screening so that they would see it. And then the hope was they would like it and they would gab to everyone and tell everyone they had to go see it. And that's what we did. And so we were very careful in the beginning to just focus on one town. Portland was our first, since we filmed there, and get that going. And then once a certain amount that was going, then we would sort of move sort of the next ring out to the burbs, and then it would go, and then we sort of do another town. So it did grow organically, and then once that started happening, of course, and this was in 2004. Really, email was just really, people had finally realized, oh my God, this is the thing. So people were emailing their friends on the East Coast, and then that really helped a lot. So it was organic, but it wasn't like we just put it out there and it went viral and we got to sit back and smoke cigars. Yeah. This was pretty much like we just had to keep tending it and doing that sort of thing.
Well, I'm also curious, in terms of the incredible list of speakers that you have involved in both What the Bleep and Down the Rabbit Hole, how did you find them? How did they come in? Did you start out with a list and then build from there, or did you just have them all at once?
We started with a list of people we wanted to get, and most of the people were pretty much like, oh, you want to interview us, that's great. Okay, and they would just kind of forget about it, and then we would show up. And one of the things that was important for the movie was, this is something that Betsy really insisted upon, was that it's like we're going to be so out there in some of the stuff we do, we have to make sure that our production methods, our production quality is really high. Mm-hmm. So the interview, they kind of were expecting like a normal news crew. You show up with a camera person, a sound person, and an interviewer who probably has a list of 10 questions, is just going to mow through them and get out of there. Not us. We showed up with 10. There was 10 of us. 3 filmmakers, a camera person, a grip assistant, 2 sound people, a craft services. It would set up little snacks because it was a real production, and we wanted it to look really good. And so the scientists at that point would be like, whoa, this is a little different. We said, sure. So then we would film. So we did the film, and then it was a lot of fun. And then they didn't hear from us for a year and a half. And, they figured, well, a lot of films get shot and nothing ever happens. So everyone kind of went to sleep and didn't really think about it until the movie started playing and they started getting emails and people started stopping them on the street. It was pretty crazy. Most of the people were pretty easy. The hardest person to get was Candace Pert, who passed away about a year ago, by the way. By Candace. But it was very important to get her because part of the thing in What the Bleep was the whole thing about the addiction to emotions and the biological basis. And she really did, a lot of the groundbreaking research on that. And we kept emailing her, and we couldn't get a response. And then we would have people that we knew who knew her email her. And this went on for months. And finally, at one point, she finally emails, I think, Mark Vicente and says, okay, so many people have been telling me to do this, I guess I should.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, she was the tough nut to crack. But everyone else was pretty much, oh yeah, but it's funny, they didn't really expect anything big to happen.
Mm.
And then when it did, it blew everyone's mind.
They all of a sudden became celebrities, scientists as celebrities.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious for you as the filmmaker who got to be along on this incredible wild journey, and not only through What the Bleep, but also through all of the further interviews that you guys did for Down the Rabbit Hole. What was the most mind-blowing? What was the most exciting thing that you learned?
Well, one thing was, let me think. I mean, sort of the single mind-blowing thing was we received over the course of What the Bleep 10 emails from people who said they were going to commit suicide, and to the point that that was the day they were going to do it, and for some reason, either someone drugged them to the theater, or they just happened to see it on the tube, 2 hours before they were going to do themselves in, and they watched the movie and they said, what was I thinking? Oh my God. So I had 10 people who were going to commit suicide that didn't. So that's fairly mind-blowing, that you have that kind of influence. Another thing that was very unexpected was these Bleep study groups started happening. Mm. And there was a woman in Tucson, Janet Ray, who she started doing it just kind of informally, and she would contact us and say, we're meeting every week to discuss things of the film. I just wanted to say we're doing this. Can I show the film? We said, of course. And it kept building, and then we started getting more requests. So she ended up being the Bleep study group coordinator. And we had 100 or 200 of these around the world. Of people would get together and they would watch part of the movie and they would talk about it. So that was very unexpected.
So then it sounds like, so there was a huge call for more. It sounds like there are tons of people out there who are engaging with the original DVD, and what you guys created, I have not been sure how to talk about it exactly specifically, because the kind of language that we have for it doesn't quite encapsulate what it is. I mean, it's not really a sequel. It's not really a director's cut. It's something, it's just different, and it includes What the Bleep all at the same time. So given that's the biggest question that we posed when we came into this interview, what is, and I know you talk about this on an interview that we have on YouTube, but what is the difference between What the Bleep and What the Bleep Down the Rabbit Hole?
Well, on a high level, the difference is the focus is a bit different. On the Down the Rabbit Hole, the response that we got from people, they wanted more information, but sort of more information about the science involved. The science and what the experiments were, and just sort of more explanation about the quantum world and that sort of stuff. What were some of the experiments happening about the mind-matter interface? So given that, we decided we were going to interview a few extra people that weren't in the original movie. One of the big ones was Dean Radin, the chief scientist at Institute of Noetic Science. Mm-hmm. And he had done a whole bunch of experiments in this sort of mind-matter interaction, telepathy experiments, random number generators. So we went and interviewed him, and then we interviewed Lynn McTaggart, who weren't in the original film. And then another weird thing that happened was these Bleep conferences sprung up, where they went around. We must have done 10 of these around the country. People who put on these conferences. Well, the very first one was in Santa Monica, and they invited all the scientists who were in the original movie to come. So they showed up, and by then we had been thinking, oh, we should need to do more because everyone's saying we want more. So we set up a green screen. We re-interviewed everyone. So now we had another 60 hours worth of interviews we didn't have in the original movie. Plus, we probably had another 40 hours of outtakes from the original movie that we didn't use. Now we have 100 hours worth of interviews. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, what are we going to do with that? So the focus has shifted, so we're talking more about the science. And it was kind of fun to cut between interviews of the same person over 3 years difference. So we did that. And then I love animation, so I wanted to do some more animation. And we decided to come up with, in the original movie, there was this Dr. Quantum comic that Reggie had on the basketball court. So we decided, let's make Dr. Quantum a character and have him animate in the movie. So we did another 15 minutes of animation. One of them was Dr. Quantum and the double slit experiment, which is sort of the cornerstone of quantum weirdness, is the double slit.
Yes.
So we, I wrote that up, and then Mark directed the animation on that, and that was in there. Which, by the way, is someone posted on YouTube and has had 6 million views or something insane.
I believe I watched that when I was in high school.
Oh, you did?
College or something like that. The first time that we'd gotten that here, I was like, I feel like I've seen this before, because it's such a wonderful explanation of that idea. It's it just messes with your head to have it explained to you, and then to watch it, it's slightly clearer.
Yeah, it's weird. So
yes.
There was that, and then in the original What the Bleep, when Amanda walks into the Baghdad theater, she splits in two. And in one, she was going to go to see a film, just sort of regular romantic comedy type thing. And the other, she was going to go in and see a movie, A Flatland, which is this book that was written around the turn of the beginning of the 20th century, very famous, about two-dimensional beings and what it would be like living in the third dimension and blah, blah, blah. That was originally supposed to be in the original What the Bleep. But what happened was, by the time we got to animate that, we were out of time and out of budget, and realized that the film would work without her actually seeing that then. So now it's rabbit hole time. We're like, well, we originally wanted to have that in there, so let's do that. So I went and Mark went in and animated that. So then we had that whole thing in there. And once that was in there, now the ending kind of changed, the whole dynamic thing. So another thing I did was I figured people had seen all the Amanda scenes a lot. So some of those I trimmed down. There was one Amanda scene that had been cut out totally, so we put that back in. So in effect, although it seems, it's like deja vu. It kind of seems like, oh, I've seen all this before, kind of, but it turns out that 90 to 95% of the interviews are new, you've never seen before, and a lot of the Amanda stuff has been trimmed down and edited, and some new stuff put in. Has a completely different ending, and so you can tell me what it is. I'm going to have to. Someone's at the door, so we're going to take a break for 1 minute. Whitney, you can tell them something interesting. I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Well, the other thing that Will didn't mention is that on the Down the Rabbit Hole, while there is the original Down the Rabbit Hole, which has actually been out of circulation for about 4 years now, it's been a really long time since you've been able to get it. Down the Rabbit Hole, we have it here. It's the new 10th anniversary edition right down here. It says it nice and sparkly. That not only has all of what Will just shared, but it also has quantum, I can't remember what it's called. It's the quantum version. So when you go in, you can choose an experience, and it goes in and it kind of shuffles things around so that you get that experience that you have asked for. So it's a completely new way to experience a DVD. It's not even really a DVD, but and for today, because we are having a huge celebration of the Down the Rabbit Hole 10th Anniversary Edition, which did come out yesterday, you can get both the DVD and the digital streaming of it for $34.95. That's just the price of the DVD. So you get both of them for the price of the DVD. And free domestic shipping. So again, it's $34.95, and you can go to www.beyondword.com/bleep, BLEEP, to grab that. And for me, Will's still not back yet, but one of the great things that you can do in order to continue with this conversation with us is please be sure to submit your questions via the Google Hangouts app. You can just click right in there, and Cindy, our producer, will let me know. And then also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. And again, you can also use the hashtag BWPresents to give us questions and be a part of the conversation. So we look forward to having you join us. And here is Will back again. Welcome. I was just sharing with them a little bit about the quantum version that you guys have created, and I was fascinated by that, and still not 100% sure how to encapsulate that in my terms. So I'm curious, how did you guys come up with the idea to do that, and how did you logistically figure out how people could do that at home?
Well, after I did my physics job, I eventually started doing a lot of computer programming, and I eventually wrote a software package that I sold for millions of dollars, and that's where I got all the money to do Autosys, or to do what the Bleep. Autosys was the product. So I knew computers and very advanced computing systems. So I got the operating specs for a DVD player. And a DVD player is basically a simple computer. It's got commands you can do, like for your menuing, there's different things, and it's a simple operating system. But I got the specs for it, and I looked up, and lo and behold, they had a random number generator built into the operating system. And we had done all these things at research about, that we interviewed people about. People did these things about random number generators and whether the mind could actually control the quantum process, and it turns out it can. So I thought, well, wouldn't that be cool if the mind can affect random numbers, and you can have the DVD player choose a random number that will choose which interview to watch. Is there some way that your consciousness is going to be able to affect that, basically making it a modern-day I Ching? So I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So we get down to Fox, because they were our DVD distributor at the time. And aside from that, see, I had, What the Bleep was almost 2 hours. We had the Down the Rabbit Hole, which was 2.5 hours. And there wasn't that much overlap, and yet we still had another 90 hours of interviews, which was more, and everyone's saying more info, more info. So I'm like, okay, you want more info? You're going to get more info. So I took the two and put them together and then added even more interviews. So it's now 5 hours. So meanwhile now, I'm looking at the specs for the operating system, and I realize there's little switching modules and whatnot. So I told the people at Fox, I said, look, you could do this, and what we could do is we could program it so you could specify how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. So let's say you drop into a section of about wave-particle duality, and there's 10 interviews. You could say, look, I only want to go down 3 levels. So when you watch the movie, you're only going to get 3 interviews out of the whole 10. Well, if you also throw the randomness on, every time you watch it, you'll get a different 3 interviews in a different order, because it's a random number. So I tell this to Fox. I'm all excited. No one's ever done this on a DVD player. And they basically said, you can't do it. That's impossible. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, you can't do that with the DVD player. Now, it's kind of funny because, as a filmmaker, people assume that you're either a filmmaker or you're a nerd scientist or you're a blah, blah, blah. So, they said, no, you can't do that. So I whip out the operating system. I says, well, according to this, these specs, blah, 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 blah. And then they kind of realized, well, let's talk to our technical department. So they talked to the technical department. Technical department goes, yeah, he can do it. I'm like, great, you can do it. So they hired a company to do the programming, which was very tricky. And I also did some other things with it where I figured, well, let's say you've seen the movies, enough. And at that point, the dramatic scenes, okay, I get Amanda's whole journey. I just want the information. So you can also specify in this to turn the dramatic scenes off. So they don't even come on. So now it's just a pure documentary. So if you do that, and then you set the random hole, the rabbit hole depth, to maybe, sometimes I would just set it to one. So you would just get one interview, and each time you could do that, turn the dramatic scenes off, and the 5-hour movie plays in about 20 minutes. So it's a whole different thing, and the idea is that the universe is going to give you the proper interviews you need to see at that time, sort of like an I Ching. So that's what the whole quantum edition, fancy DVD thing is all about. And you can see why it's a little hard to explain, because you can't say it's like, oh, it's like what they did with, the second version of Star Wars, because no one, to my knowledge, no one has still used the operating system of the DVD player like was done for this. So it's one time only. DVDs are going away slowly, so probably no one will do it. So maybe it'll be my claim to fame.
Well, it's a remarkable way to actually interact with a DVD, and as you say, with everything moving toward digital so quickly, it's nice to have a DVD that actually says, no, you need this in a DVD because this is what it can do for you, which is phenomenal. So, and I just want to let you know we do have a viewer question, and it's a viewer question that I'm sure is very, very popular out there right now. From Matt Weaver, he asks, do you plan on doing any other What the Bleep videos in the future? He's thinking.
Do I have to? Well, it's funny you should ask. About a year ago, we were talking about the 10th anniversary, and I got the idea, like, well, let's clue people in on what's the subjects we introduced in the original movie, and the rabbit hole, what has evolved since then? Where's the discussion going? What's scientific research? And the idea was to do a 10th anniversary DVD release, and then, kind of put that on maybe a little 40-minute documentary about that. And then, as normally happens with myself, I sort of get carried away and thinking, well, maybe I could do that. And before long, it's like, oh, this is Bleep 2. And filmed, probably have 50 or 60 hours worth of interviews. Interviewed a lot of great people. Some of the people that were in the original movie, interviewed them. A lot of new people, and interviewed all of them. And I cut all the interviews together, and stepped back and looked at it and realized I didn't really quite know yet what I was doing. So now everything's on hold. It's sleeping somewhere in the back of my mind, hopefully. Or maybe I'm waiting for the dream that will have divine revelation, hopefully. But whatever it is, it's ruminating back there. I have a feeling that eventually I'll do it. But you really, really, really have to want to do it, because, boy, is it a lot of work. Oh, gee, the animation, cutting interviews together, and getting a story that fits with what you're doing but isn't so, show and tell. And that's, it's just so much work, and you really got to want to do it. So at this point, I'm just kind of... But I have a feeling it will happen. I know that the focus of it will be different than what the Bleep. It's still going to be science and spirituality eventually, but what the Bleep was really more of a look inward. A look into the inward and the tiny and the small, like some of the quantum things and just the strange inner world of that, and then the whole thing about molecules of emotion and all that was, and personal transformation. My feeling is we've all been doing that for years now. There was a moment where, self-help books were like, oh my God, there's a self-help book. Now there's self-help books everywhere. So things have moved along quite a bit, and I feel that for so many of us, the personal transformation is always there, and that's what you work on all the time. But really, I think it's time to sort of, as they say, get off the yoga mat and look around the world. And right now, I mean, is there a major crisis in my life? No, not, I'm doing all right. Not really. Is there a major crisis out there? Oh, yeah. And so Bleep 2 is more focused on what's happening in the world and how we interact with the world. And, a lot more of the information about how this connectivity thing is happening. We talked to Lynn McTaggart. She was telling us the studies they did where they took blood cells from someone and drove it 10 miles away, and then they did something to the person, like, prick them with a pin, and the blood cells 10 miles away would react. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah.
And just so much of this thing about the interconnectivity. So if really interconnectivity is, it appears that that's not happening, but the quantum says because of entanglement, it's happening all the time everywhere. We're just fooled by our perception. If that really is happening, you can't just focus on your personal thing and think it's going to work, because you're connected to the exterior world, and if the exterior world's a mess, that's going to affect you too. So the new Bleep 2 is going to be looking more to society and the world, and certain ideas like things like ethics. I think ethics are this list of things you're supposed to do or not supposed to do. And, it's more like, no, that's not that you're supposed to because it's a moral thing or you're going to get to heaven or whatnot. It's just that's the way the universe works. So if we are connected and you screw someone over, you have an energetic connection with them, and so you're going to be screwing yourself over. It's that kind of idea that I think we're going to develop more, but what the bleep do I know?
Well, and there's no timeline on that, and I'm not putting any pressure on you. I just love to hear about that because it's so true. And a lot of the interviews that I've been talking with people, they're just saying it's time to turn outward and look outside of ourselves. And I know that there's a little clip of some of the work that you guys did on this new 10th anniversary version of Down the Rabbit Hole. Make sure it's not too shiny. And I just want to let everybody know, again, you can get this at www.beyondword.com/bleep. You can get this as well as the digital stream of the DVD. Again, that doesn't have the quantum version, just like Will explained, that amazingness. But it does, you'll get the DVD as well, so you can experience it both ways. And you get both of them for $34.95, the price of the DVD. So be sure to go and grab that right away. And we are halfway through our interview, and so I want to take this chance to introduce Eva. Eva will be joining us, and she has some questions of her own for you, Will. She just has been a fan for a very long time, and I'm so thrilled that we get the opportunity to put the two of you together. So Eva, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Well, I will go ahead and launch into it. What is your first question?
Well, a lot of my questions I really have to say you've answered just in the interview so far. But what I'm really curious about, I had become familiar with what the bleep many years ago when it first came out, and was fascinated with the fact that if you learn something new every day, that you'll fire a new neural path in the brain, and had really worked on that. And then about 3 months ago, I had a traumatic head injury and had a seizure and a brain hemorrhage, and was in a coma for a couple days, and have really used what the bleep and the spirit and everything that I've learned, the secret, just to try to retrain my brain with the right thoughts and kind of get going the right way. If I have to kind of teach it again, I want to do it right. So I want to ask you kind of what is your advice with that? What would be your best knowledge to try to get ingrained in there again?
Well, the first off, you must have, I think, you have some good guardian angels working with you that you got
Indeed.
to get on, having that happen to get on to be able to do this. So that's great. The reason I'm smiling is my wife has been doing all this research on traumatic head injuries and what it does to the brain. And she did that because her son, my stepson, did a dolphin dive into a pool about 2 years ago, and he thought it was 5 feet deep, and it was 1 foot deep. He had this, traumatic brain injury, and there are these people now who, and I don't know that, but I can get you the information. If you give Cindy or Whitney your contact, I'll email you some information on this, because they found that what happens with the traumatic brain thing is that your brain starts firing in like the wrong way, and it just doesn't know any better. It just fires in the wrong way, and it's just not going right. And they've developed these sort of biofeedback type technologies where they basically will put the little hat on you, so you get all of the brain waves, and they can say, oh, your brain is firing this way, it should go this way, and they have ways to get the brain refiring in the proper way. And this is fairly, I mean, this has only been around for a couple of years. In fact, I even had a filmmaker friend visit me about a month ago, and he was doing this in where was it? It was down in Ventura, I think, California. But there are people scattered around that do this. So that if you can find someone who does this sort of stuff, that's really the best thing, because you can say you can look at this information and say, okay, brains fire together. I really want to do it. I really want to do it. But you're kind of a little blind, because you don't see what the brain's actually doing. And this technology can do amazing things. And in fact, my stepson, who's been doing this, he had trouble focusing at school and would just forget to turn assignments. And he did about a month of this thing to retrain the brain, and already he's turning assignments and doing much better. So it's really extraordinary technology out there to do that. So give Whitney or Cindy your email stuff, and I'll email you sort of some information on that. And there's some YouTube things and whatnot.
Fantastic.
Really, yeah, that's great. I'm glad you asked the question. Yeah.
And we do have her information, and we'll send that along to you so you can reach out to her.
What was that?
We do have your information, and we'll send that along to you so that you can reach back out to Eva.
Yay!
Thank you so much. And just thank you again for making What the Bleep and giving us all of that information. And I so look forward to another project if it is there. It really has changed my life and kind of saved my life this time around. So thank you for doing it, and please keep up doing all of this stuff for us. It makes such a difference.
Great. Well, as a filmmaker or an artist, really, you just kind of that's. I mean, you want to be loved, you want people to like it, but in the end, you want to do something positive, and that's what all of us who made the movie. There was 3 filmmakers, and then all the anime. It's a whole army that makes a film, and we were all going for to really make a difference. So thank you.
I have a question really quick. As we hear Eva's incredible story, and I know that there's hundreds more, thousands more out there just like it, I'm curious, well, how have you seen the world change since What the Bleep first came out?
How have I seen the world change? Well, let's see. There's a yoga studio in every strip mall. I wasn't there before. That was a big deal. Part of the reason I made What the Bleep, I've been doing spiritual practice for many years, and everyone always thought you were a weirdo. Oh my God, you're doing this. You and some cult. You guys are all going to eat, Kool-Aid and drop over dead. I mean, you got that all the time, and you had to hide what you were doing. You were meditating. Now, of course, that just doesn't exist. I mean, you tell people you meditate, and they're like, oh yeah, what kind of meditation you do? And I mean, no one thinks you're weird anymore for doing it. So a lot of the the more spiritual aspects of life, people can just say right out now, and no one rolls their eyes or anything. I mean, I just don't get that anymore. So that's a huge difference. All the, I mean, look at ecology. Ecology, 10 years ago was still kind of a radical thing. That, you're into that, what's the matter? Let's drill more oil. And there's a very different consciousness on that today. And of course, everyone always talks about the internet, but the fact that so many things get press now that didn't before, this whole thing about being connected, that's very different. Now, there's a dark side to that too, I think, in that there's a way in which people don't relate as much as they used to. In other words, you go to, I don't know, you see restaurants where they'll be, the classic is the parents are sitting there and the kids like this the whole time.
Yes.
They're not relating. Or, I'm driving somewhere and Eric's in the back seat and he's not looking to where we're going or hey, look at the cows there or anything. He's like, this sort of thing. And I think we'll see the effect of that, but it's weird. And on the one hand, people are more connected and on the other hand, they're more dissociated.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think that's also a big thing. Another thing is people, this whole electronic thing where, Twitter, let's get it in, 80 syllables or 80 words or whatever it is. It's the sound bite. You've got to do it in like 45 seconds or no one's interested. And, really, I mean, great thoughts you don't get in 45 seconds. You're lucky if you get it in 45 days, more like 45 years. So, I mean, that sort of just instant thing tends to make things superficial. So that's happening too. And it's all happening at such a ridiculously fast rate that who knows what's going to happen.
Who knows what will happen in the next 10 years. Eva, do you have another question for Will?
I wanted to know, with the Emoto water, that was one of I was always very fascinated by the water droplets and the studies that he had done with that. And just wanted to ask you kind of what was it like for you to work with him on that and to kind of see that more firsthand, and how is it to use it more towards fixing our bodies? If it does, if words are that strong towards water and we're that much made out of water. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it in the book or in the movie, but I've been very fascinated by that.
Yeah, let's see, the line in the movie was, if our thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
Yes.
And I'm smiling because we were filming the scene and we're in the trailer and we couldn't come up with the great line. We knew that was the closer line and we just couldn't come up with it. And our camera person goes, well, what about just saying? And then he comes up with the line. And we all look at each other.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So working with Dr. Emoto, what happened was a friend of mine, actually, when I was writing What the Bleep, or actually in the early planning, he sends me this email, dude, I think this is something that, you might be into. It was about his studies. And this was way before he really had much publicity at all. So I said, that's great. I wrote it into the script, and then we contacted him and said, we'd like to use some of your pictures and some of the words from your book in a movie. And they said, okay, here's a licensing fee. We paid the licensing fee and went away. And it was like the interviews with everyone else. We went away and they figured, I don't know what they figured. They probably didn't figure anything. It's just, oh, well. And then the movie comes out, and suddenly Dr. Emoto is on, the front cover. According to Richard of Beyond Words, it saved the company because Beyond Words had the publishing rights to Emoto's books, and they were doing okay. And then the movie came out and it went through the roof. So we didn't. I didn't really work with him at all. We just had the pictures, and I had it, and then I put it up there. Of course, after the movie came out, then he was in the country, and I met him a couple times, stayed at my house a few times, and then he eventually invited me over to Japan for a water and peace festival. Spent a bunch of time in
Wow.
Japan with him. So, and that was great. And we talked about, what he did. Now, from a scientific, now there was a lot of stuff that on the internet. If you look up his name, one of the things that comes up is as Emoto water crystals debunked, because that was a big thing. And in the down the rabbit hole, one of the other featurettes we did was called Reflections on the Bleep. And what we did was people who were in the original movie, we asked them, what'd you think about this? What'd you think about that? What'd you think about the water crystals? And Dean Radin said, well, actually, I did an experiment based on the water crystals. And he talks about it in some detail. And basically the bottom line is, well, Dr. Emoto did very select choosing of the water crystals. He would choose, Dean said most of the time the water crystals, it's not like everything looks wonderful. Most of them just look like blobs. But they did a test, and so Dean said, paraphrasing, but he said, when you look at Emoto's work, it looks like it's a big effect. He said, actually, it's like this. Tiny, tiny, tiny. He said, it's a real effect. We see a real effect from focusing on the water, but it was exaggerated in what Dr. Emoto did. So then people asked me, well, do you think you should have put it in the movie because, you act like it's scientific and da-da-da-da. And I guess it's interesting that it's kind of an ethical question. I mean, do you put it there? But I know so many people who were changed by seeing that scene. I mean, fundamentally changed by that.
I agree.
And so you say, well, no, it wasn't rigorous science. But, okay, if you want to play the science game, let's play the science game. Someone puts out a hypothesis. He put out a hypothesis that thoughts affect the molecular structure or the freezing property of the water. He put it out there, and then Dean went and did some tests to see whether it was true or not. So that is the scientific method. A lot of what science comes out with is just crazy, and then people do the experiments, and either it goes further or they just go, no, it's too wacko, let's just drop it. So I think that those scenes were so important and just affected so many people that, I mean, it was just wonderful that Dr. Emoto, and you heard he just passed last week.
I heard that actually.
Yes, he's no longer with us in this world. But boy, what a legacy that he did, and he was tireless. He was always traveling around, and very great sense of humor, and in some respects, he was the showman. It was the Dr. Emoto Water Roadshow, and it was great. And like I said, he inspired a lot of people, and inspired a lot of transformation. So I just think that what a legacy.
I agree. I think that's fantastic. Just my one final question, I guess, would be, so much of the movie is about kind of our patterns and things, and how we have the same relationship again and the same jobs again. And how do you suggest, what's the best way to try to change that? Do you have any advice on that necessarily?
Well, it's really, in my experience, has everything to do with, in the mystical literature, they sometimes call it the silent watcher. They sometimes call it the observer. Sometimes call it the higher self. It's like there's a part of you that is always watching everything. And the thing is, when you get stuck in your patterns, it's like you go into autopilot, and you're just going to, someone cuts you off on the highway, and what you're going to do is you're going to make some hand gesture, and then you're going to rant and rave for 2 minutes. So some of it is really, as soon as you go down that road, as soon as you hit the replay button, that's what's going to happen. So part of it is the silent watcher, the relay, or the replay button. It's like, well, the guy just cut me off, and a little bit of awareness sleeps in there and says, here's what I always do. And I get all pissed off, and so for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to be mad, and then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to, kick the dog and yell at my wife. So you kind of know that that's the whole thing. So it's just awareness. The person cuts you off, and you just, at some point, you say, no, I'm not going to do it. In the early stages, it's like a little awareness goes off, and you're like, I think I'm going to play my pattern. Then you just watch. The observer, the silent watcher, you just watch. And after a while, what happens to me is you see these patterns over and over, and after a while, if you go unconscious and you just do it, you just keep doing it. But when you have that silent watcher, the awareness, you're like, I'm doing it over again. And for me, I just get bored with myself. At a certain point, I'm like, God, Will, you going to do this again? I mean, come on, haven't you got enough of that? Good Lord. And then after I just drop it. I used to, years ago, when someone hired someone to do something, let's say around the house, and they would screw up, I worked for a while in New York. I would do the New Yorker thing. What are you doing? You screwed up. Come on. Who do you think I am? You make them feel really bad that they screwed up. And then, and I started noticing after I did that, I just felt bad. I just felt yucky. Even though I felt righteous when I did it, I felt yucky. And I kept noticing that. And something interesting happens. As I noticed it, I would feel yucky for longer afterwards. And then I'm just like, I'm just not going to do that anymore. So when it would come up, I would, take a deep breath and I found since then that, being nice, you point out, look, this wasn't done right, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, sorry. And it's like, well, everyone screws up. Okay, you screwed up. And then it ends up working out better. So that's kind of the, it's just awareness, just being aware of what you're doing. And then at some point you just push in the clutch. You say, no, you're going to do it. Nope, not this time. So,
awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
And we do have one last viewer question, Will, and it's kind of a big one, so we'll see if we have time for you to answer it. So I actually have to read this one. It's complicated. It's from Ken Prince, and he says, I'm interested on your speculations on wave function collapse and the Big Bang. If an event is in superposition until observation, what mechanism brought the wave function collapse for the Big Bang? I don't understand most of that. He's thinking again.
Say that again.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question? Yeah.
Okay, so Ken says, I am interested on your speculations on wave function collapse and the Big Bang. If an event is in superposition until observation, what mechanism brought the wave function collapse for the Big Bang? We can also...
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question because well, when you say the observation causes the collapse of the wave function, I mean, that's true, but this is something that was never clarified in what the Bleep, and I've talked to a lot of quantum physicists since then, that it's not just observation that causes the collapse of the wave function, it's interaction. Any sort of system interaction between a system and another will cause the collapse. Now, some people then argue like, well, okay, you can say that, but you don't know that it's collapsed unless someone actually sees it and does somehow observe it somehow. So physicists have been going round and round and round the circle on this. So it just has to be some sort of interaction. Now, if you say what sort of observation, but let's say it is observation. What sort of observation caused the collapse at the time of the Big Bang? You could also say, well, what caused the Big Bang? Why is there a Big Bang? Why is there anything at all? So that's why it's the big question, because it's not. It really gets back to the primal cause, and no one's figured that out. I mean, science hopes to, and of course, religion has their answer, God, universal consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. So that is a cool question, though. I love those questions.
Well, and what we can do, Will, is I'll send this question on to you, and then if you want to muse on it a little bit farther, we can post it on the What the Bleep Facebook page, and people can go there and hear what further thoughts you have. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great idea.
Well, we will do that, and we'll post that as soon as Will has finished contemplating. Well, not finished, I'm sure, but has contemplated on it a little bit more. So be sure to go to the What the Bleep Facebook page to see that. And we are actually coming up on the end of the hour, and I want to be very specific. I want to clarify a couple of things. For the Down the Rabbit Hole, What the Bleep Down the Rabbit Hole that you're ordering now at www.beyondword.com/bleep, it's actually a signed edition if you order before the 25th of October. So be sure to jump on there and grab that, because you'll get this as well as the digital version. And again, that's all for $34.95, which is just the price of the DVD. So you get a lot for the price. And you will also get free domestic shipping. And Will, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the show with us. And Eva, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Great. Well,
thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was a fun talk. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you. And so everybody knows who's watching, next week we will have Hazel Dixon Cooper and Bridget Walther on the show. They are the authors of our upcoming book, Harness Astrology's Bad Boy. They'll be talking about the power of Pluto in your life. If you've noticed that things have been a little bit wonky for a little while, maybe the past couple of years or so, it's because Pluto is transiting through Capricorn, and the last time it did that, we had the French Revolution and the American Revolution. So things are going into a bit of a mix-up right now. So be sure to come back next week, same time, same place, and we'll get a little insight as to why things are feeling a little off. So thank you again, and we'll see you next week.